In this movie, we're going to look at the critically important controls for viewport navigation. Specifically, that's the ability to be able to take our scene camera on a ride throughout the level to explore the scene from different kinds of angles. This is a critically important skill when you're constructing levels, because when you're building up an environment, you're going to need to see it from all kinds of perspectives. That's what viewport navigation achieves. Now, to achieve viewport navigation, we're going to need to use both the mouse and the keyboard, and it is my aim by the end of this video that you're going to be dreaming in keyboard shortcuts for Unity. Now, Unity uses the Maya style controls for viewport navigation, which means that if you've used the 3D modeling software Maya before, then you're in for a real treat, because the viewport controls for Unity are exactly the same as Maya. But if you haven't used Maya before, then don't worry, because we're going to cover viewport navigation from the very beginning. So what you see in front of you here inside the Unity interface is a scene that has been opened here from the project panel. This scene is called Scene Navigation. I simply created this scene, chose File, chose Save Scene to create this scene. Now, if this scene is not open for you, you can easily open it inside the Scene tab simply by double-clicking on the scene to open that inside the Scene tab, and here we have the contents of that scene. Already from the hierarchy panel, you can see we've got the cubes listed, the plane, the directional light, the main camera, and all of these different objects that compose the scene. So how can we wander around the level and take a look around? Well, we have different commands for this. Let's start with looking around. So if I want to, in fact, look around the scene, quite literally, I simply hold down the right button on my mouse, and with the right button held down, you can see already my cursor has changed to an eye icon. And as I'm holding down the right mouse button, I'm simply moving my mouse around. And again, I can release my mouse, hold down the right button again, and simply continue to move my view around to create this kind of looking around controls. So that's the first thing I can do. So I can look around by holding down the right mouse button and moving the mouse around. Now I can zoom in and out of the scene by rolling the middle mouse wheel. So I can roll the middle mouse wheel up to move in, and I can roll it down to zoom out. So again, roll it up to zoom in and roll it down to zoom out. Now I can also pan my view around, that is, move it on a parallel plane to the view here by clicking and holding the middle mouse wheel and then moving my mouse around. So I can move it to the left to pan my view this way, to the right to pan my view this way, still holding down the middle mouse button, and move up and down, continually holding that middle mouse button and moving my mouse around. I can pan my view around. So that's pretty useful. I can also use first-person navigation controls. To do that, I'm going to hold down the right mouse button. Again, we've seen this before. By holding down the right mouse button and moving my mouse, I can kind of look around. But while I'm in this mode, I can also use the keys on the keyboard W, A, S, and D. W means move forwards, S means move down, A is left, and D is right. So I can use that combination of controls, still holding down the right mouse button, as you can see by the icon here, and using W, A, S, and D on the keyboard. I can use first-person controls to navigate around the level. So that's pretty useful too. So far we've seen the ability to hold down the right button on the mouse to look around. I can use W, A, S, and D to use the first-person controls. I can roll my mouse in and roll it out to zoom in and out. And I can also pan by holding down the middle mouse button and then moving my mouse around. So that's pretty useful. I can also use the frame command to center a particular object at the center of my view, and then my controls revolve around that object. Let me show you how that works. For example, if I select, let's say, this cube here by left clicking on it, or alternatively, I can select it here from the hierarchy panel. With the object selected, I can press the F key on the keyboard. That is F for frame. So I can press the F key, and suddenly this cube is now centered on the center of the viewport. And my controls now revolve around this. What does that mean? Well, if I roll my middle mouse wheel out and in, I'm zooming in and out on that selected and framed object. Alternatively, I can rotate around this object too by holding down the Alt key on the keyboard or the Option key on the Mac, and with that held down, if I left click and drag my mouse, I can rotate around the selected and framed object. So for example, I'm holding down the Alt key on the keyboard or the Option key on a Mac, left clicking and dragging my mouse, and I can rotate around the selected object. Similar thing here, if I select, for example, this cube instead and press F, that cube now is centered, and by holding down the Alt key, left clicking and dragging my mouse, I'm rotating around that object. I can run my middle mouse wheel in and out to zoom in and out on that object, hold down the Alt, left click and drag, and rotate around that object. Now, by using a combination of all these different controls, I have the ability to navigate absolutely anywhere in this level. So I can kind of move my view over here in first person mode. I can select this object, press F, and now I can rotate around that Alt, left click and dragging. So that's pretty incredible, but just by using these simple selection of controls and by combining them together, we have the ability to maneuver our camera absolutely anywhere in the level, and that's critical for building fantastic levels here inside Unity.